Hey everyone, so welcome back. I'm Douglas Johnson. I'm a meditation teacher, a yoga teacher, a certified Kilobi inquiries facilitator, ordained minister, non-dual teacher. I just basically deal with anything that is dealing with spirituality. Today I wanted to share about maybe the most or one of the most powerful tools that you have or practices that you have that I've discovered anyway. And I just recently went through a what might be called a dark night of the soul period. Um, and this tool or this practice helped pull me out of that. So I wanted to share it with you. And it's something I've mentioned before, but I thought it's a good time to remind everyone about this particular tool. So before I get into the talk, I do want to encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already. If you get something from this video, give it a thumbs up. Please leave a comment. Those also help with the YouTube algorithm. And it just helps spread the word. It helps get it out there. And of course, share this with anyone who you think it might be helpful. I also want to thank all my patrons on Patreon. They are the ones that allow me to actually do this work. Otherwise, I would just be too busy with work to be able to make these videos. Even though these are very humble videos, they actually take quite a lot of time and energy. So thank you to those of you who help support me in making these videos. You are as much a part of this as I am. Okay, so what is this practice? It is gratitude. So I want to emphasize this is a practice. This is a mental practice. This is mind training. Just as you can go to the gym or go to a yoga class and you can train your body to be healthier, to recover from injury. You can transform your body with practices. The same is absolutely true of your mind. Okay? And so I really want to emphasize when I talk about these things like forgiveness or non-judgment, or in this instance, gratitude, I'm talking about a practice. I'm talking about something that you implement mentally. And many of you have come to me by way of yoga, and yoga is a type of spiritual practice. And it will take you, the yoga postures will take you a certain distance, but they're only going to take you so far. They're not going to take you all the way to unlimited peace and joy. They were never meant to. Anyone who really has studied the yoga tradition knows this. Okay? There might be some yoga teachers out there claiming that all you need to do is posture practice, but that really isn't the perspective of the yoga tradition. That's maybe a westernized idea. And if they can do that for you, great. Okay, I'm not here to put anybody down, but in my experience, no one that I respect, no one that I trust, no source that I found, scriptural source in yoga, has ever said that all you need to do are yoga postures and you're going to achieve enlightenment and embodiment. That just isn't the case. Yoga postures are one tool amongst many. And for most people, in order to achieve first enlightenment and then embodiment, it's going to take many different tools. Okay? So many of you have come to me by way of, again, yoga postures. That's great. That can be a good first step. But eventually, you're going to have to work on your heart and your mind. That's really where the embodiment piece is going to come on. I've spoken before about sort of the honeymoon period. You might wake up and have a period where you feel like all your problems are solved and you're there and you get it. And it's true, you are there and you do get it. But for many people, this is a temporary situation. And then you find that there's more work to do. And that's the part where I talk about cleaning up. First, wake up. Oftentimes when you have that wake up experience, very blissful, and you sort of get what my teacher called a peek in the tent. You sort of get a preview of what embodiment is like. And that experience can last, a few days, a few weeks, a few months, even a few years for some people. But for most people, that it usually isn't the case that that's it. We read stories about people like Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie, like boom, they wake up and that's it. And we think, oh, that's, until that happens to me, I'm not enlightened. And, that's when we know we've arrived. For most people, those are very exceptional stories. So don't expect that to happen to you. Don't expect to have a huge event that then everything gets cleaned up. That's a little bit like expecting yourself to get hit by lightning. Okay? I'm not saying it never happens. Of course, people get hit by lightning. But do you actually walk around expecting to be hit by lightning? Is that something that you're overly concerned about? Many more people get into car accidents, right? Most people do. And so with spiritual awakening, most people, even if they have a sort of event awakening, they later have to clean up to fully embody what they realized. Okay, so these practices that I give you are things to practice. And what I love about these practices is they are things that you can do 24/7. Okay, if you're talking about postures, yoga postures, asana, then you have to have a certain space. You have to have, people, if there are people in your lives, they have to agree to give you some time and space to do that in. The temperature needs to be right. Various things need to be in place. You have to be in certain physical health in order to do postures. Okay, I recently had coronavirus and I couldn't do any postures while I was sick in bed, right? So those practices, while they're very powerful postures, pranayams, breathing techniques, things like that, very powerful, even seated or formal meditation, very powerful, but somewhat limited. There will be times when we can't do that. There are also, even if every day we can do that as part of our sadhana, then there'll be much of the day when we can't do that, right? So what I love about the practices like the one I'm talking about today, which is gratitude, is this is really something that you can practice constantly, okay? So very, very important to understand that this is a practice that can be ongoing. In certain scriptures, they talk about prayer being constant. And gratitude can be like that, where gratitude is something that you are practicing constantly. And this can cure depression. It can help pull you out of a dark night situation. It can help with so many things. So gratitude helps with a change of perspective. In fact, all spirituality ultimately is about a change of perspective. It's about seeing things from a different point of view. You might say a point of view that's closer and closer to a divine point of view. Now, for me, true spirituality that I learned from Zen, what I'm going to call true spirituality, complete spirituality, human spirituality, involves holding both the sort of divine absolute perspective and the relative human perspective simultaneously. Right? In the Christian doctrine, it said that Jesus was 100% divine and 100% human. And I think that's an important teaching. That's what you need to become. As 100% human, you're not denying the human experience. And a lot of this sort of denying of the human experience, I think, comes from some teachers in the East, where you hear about these fantastical teachers who maybe they don't eat, they don't have sex, they perform miracles all the time, all kinds of fantastical stuff, and they don't seem human. And for whatever reason, this is really appealing to human beings. I'm not sure why. I think because we reject our humanity. We so often are looking for a teacher or someone to follow who isn't human, as if being human is dirty and bad and something we want to get rid of. So this isn't really what I teach. Rather, what I teach is we need to be fully human, but then we also need to realize the absolute truth of things, which is not the limited human perspective. The limited human perspective is contained within that bigger point of view. So perspective. When I am caught in my little egoic perspective, then I'm going to suffer. And one of the things that really keeps us in an egoic perspective, or one of the hallmarks of being in an egoic perspective, is a sense of lack, a sense of wanting, a sense of limitation. And in my experience, gratitude can help you with all of these things. So what is gratitude? How do you practice gratitude? Well, gratitude is noticing the abundance that you have already, what is already here. So gratitude can be as simple as being grateful for being able to take a breath. Now that might seem, silly. Of course we can breathe, but as an asthmatic, as someone who's had difficulty breathing in the past, that's not actually true. Many people now have had experience with COVID, and one of the symptoms of having COVID is sometimes difficulty breathing or really painful breathing. So maybe you've had that experience and you know how precious a deep inhale and exhale that is free of pain, free of difficulty actually is. This is not a given as a human being. Again, we tend to suffer as humans because we're taking things for granted. And taking things for granted is the opposite of gratitude. Okay, so gratitude is not taking anything for granted. That's how you practice it. So you can start with your breath. Can you take a deep breath in and a deep breath out without pain? Maybe you can't. Then you can look for other things to be grateful for. But for many of us, much of our life, we're going to be able to take a deep breath in and a deep breath out without pain or difficulty. That is a huge thing to be grateful for. Okay? So again, the ego is focused on lack. What don't I have? Maybe I don't have a romantic partner. Maybe I don't have enough money. Maybe I don't own my own home. Maybe I don't have the car that I want. List it off, right? Our mind can go on and on and on. One of the definitions of economics is how human beings try and satisfy their unlimited desires with limited resources. Okay, so unlimited desires. It doesn't matter how much we give you. The human mind has the tendency to just want more. So do you find yourself lacking? If you're an average human being, chances are you do. Okay, so your mind is, again, the perspective, the egoic perspective is focused on lack. How do you get out of that? You start noticing what you do have. You have your breath. Do you have health? Now, maybe you're not perfectly healthy, but probably more is right in your body right now than wrong. More is going right. Maybe you have high blood pressure. Maybe you have diabetes. Maybe you even had, scares with cancer or what. Maybe you're fighting cancer right now. But if you're listening to this talk, chances are there's a lot going on right now in your body that allows you to listen to this talk. So for instance, can you see me? Well, then your eyes are working. That is a miracle. Can you hear me? Well, then your ears are working. Again, sight, being able to hear, these are amazing things. The senses are amazing, amazingly rich. Can you taste your food? Again, some people who have had COVID have had that taken from them. The enjoyment of being able to taste and smell. Imagine if that's taken from you for the rest of your life and you can no longer enjoy the pleasure of a meal. So again, if I'm focused on, I don't have enough money, I don't have a partner, then I can sit there and I can eat a meal and take for granted that I can taste the food, that the food probably tastes good. Chances are, if you're listening to this talk, you're living in a situation where you can eat a nourishing, delicious meal. That is something that you can be grateful for, right? And this is part of the Christian tradition often, is to say grace, to give gratitude for the food there. So gratitude, so powerful. And Thanksgiving, we can practice it then, of course. That's a great time to remember to be grateful. But really, I think gratitude is something that you want to practice always, and especially if you find yourself depressed or you find yourself in a mindset of lacking. So, while gratitude is something that you can practice anytime you notice yourself focusing on lack, one way to practice it is called gratitude journaling. And one way that you can do that is you simply buy a journal, something that you want to write in, something that's going to appeal to you, that you want to pick up. Maybe get something with a beautiful cover on it, a journal. Get a nice pen and have that maybe by your bed. And before you go to bed every night, you can sit there and maybe you decide to write a full page, and you just take the time to write out a full page of things that you are grateful for. And so these are things, another way of thinking about gratitude. If you're like, I'm not grateful for anything, everything's so bad in my life, just think about something that you would miss if it were taken from you that you have. So what about all your fingers? Do you have all your fingers? Or maybe you're missing some, but you still have some fingers, right? Well, that's something to be grateful for, because if your fingers were taken, you'd probably miss them. What about being able to walk? Can you walk? Maybe it's even painful for you to walk. Maybe you have sciatica, but you can still walk. There are people who cannot walk at all, not even painfully. They just cannot walk. What about being able to speak, right? There are people who, because of throat cancer or other things, they lose their ability to speak. Another thing to be grateful for. I already mentioned the senses, being able to smell and touch and taste and see and hear. You can list those off. Do you have money in the bank? Maybe you think, again, the ego thinks a lot of things. Maybe you think you need more money. Maybe you think you don't have enough. But is there money in the bank? If you needed to go out right now and purchase something, could you? Well, then that's something to be grateful for. Because again, that money, if that money were taken from you, you would be in worse shape. Are you listening to this on a functioning phone or laptop? Well, that laptop and that phone is a miracle. It's a technological miracle. It's absolutely amazing that you have that. If you're my age or older, then you didn't grow up with these things. You didn't have these things. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have a little computer in your pocket with all this information on it. So again, if you're listening to this talk, this is a miracle. This is something that we wouldn't have had when I was growing up. Do you have clothes in your closet? Do you have food in your fridge? Do you have clean water? Do you have hot and cold water at your demand? Now, I may name some things that you don't have again, but the practice is to find the things that you would miss if they were gone and to make it conscious. Okay? Now, this is something that can literally rewire your brain. And this is what ultimately spirituality is really about. It's when we rewire our brain for a different perspective, then we begin to experience the joy and the aliveness that is our birthright. If you look at the birds and the animals, they seem to experience a sense of peace and joy that we as human beings tend to lack. And that's because of our ability to think abstractly and the tendency of our mind to focus on the negative rather than the positive. So that's the bad news. That's what evolutionary biology is telling us, that we're probably not wired to see the good. This is why we were able to dominate. Our mind was constantly thinking of doomsday scenarios and planning for those, and that was a good survival mechanism. Survival. But if we're really honest with ourselves as human beings, most of us aren't at risk of not surviving. In fact, I would argue that the scenario has flipped, where we're actually at risk of not surviving because so many of us are acting as though our survival is in question. So chances are, if you're listening to this talk, you've got a computer, a phone, a car, a roof over your head, food in the fridge, money in the bank. You are surviving. You do not need to be in a panic mode. You do not need to be depressed because of lack. You are living in so much abundance that humans in the past and even much of humanity today would be envious of. So practicing gratitude is slowing down long enough from the rat race that many of us in the West are sort of engaged in. And it's not just a Western thing, though. I think if you listen to the teachings of the Buddha and the yogis, you see this has been going on a long time, because they're addressing many of the same things. But maybe it's gotten worse, or maybe more of us are experiencing this because more of us are maybe living with more abundance. So this is taking the time to slow down and to make conscious what we do have, the plus, the abundance. Okay? The lack is actually only really in our mind. The lack is actually really only an idea that things should be other than they are. Reality just is what it is, and it's always abundant. Even when there is a perceived lack, that is a type of abundance. That is a type of experience. You only can experience the lack because of the abundance, because of the plus. There's some people that talk about in spiritual terms, why is there something rather than nothing? So many of us don't realize that the opposite of our experience is sort of this nothingness, and complete emptiness, a complete void or lack. So the fact that we're having any experience at all, even if it's this experience of an idea of lack, of needing something I don't have, that is still a positive experience. That is a experience that you're having rather than an experience of nothing. Many people fear death because they fear voidness. They fear nothingness. They fear, the ultimate lack. But then many of these same people live their life suffering because of ideas that they lack certain things. They lack money, they lack success, they lack recognition, they lack love, they lack whatever it is. So again, this is a practice that I use myself, and I still will experience dark night experiences. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that, but a dark night is very often when you're feeling cut off from abundance, cut off from your divine nature, cut off from, the connection that is the reality of our experience. And so there's a difference between feeling cut off and being cut off. You're never cut off, ever. It's impossible. You are simply never cut off. But as human beings, we will have periods or times where we feel cut off. And so, Jesus, at times on his journey, he experiences that, where he has doubt, and he has fear, and he has to sort of find his faith. Why have you forsaken me? That's like a dark night moment. That's a moment where he was feeling abandoned by the divine, and then he remembers to let go and surrender. So surrender is another very powerful practice, but I'm not going to talk about that today. Really want to emphasize gratitude. So I'd love to hear from you. If you are practicing gratitude already, let me know how you do that. If you haven't, try this out and come back and let me know how it goes for you. Again, this is something you can do always. All you have to do is think through it. If you are having a bad day, if someone cuts you off in traffic, what could you be grateful for? Well, at least I didn't get in an accident on my drive to work, right? Maybe you have a fight with somebody you love. Well, at least again, you have a full belly and you have water that you can drink, clean water that you can drink. There's innumerable ways in which you can do this. And again, this is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful spiritual practices that you can do. One of the most powerful ways you can rewire your brain. And again, if you really feel like, I just don't know where to start with the gratitude journaling. Maybe before bed, maybe upon waking, however it works for you best. It can be part of your meditation routine, but see if you can take some time and fill a page every day with what are you grateful for. And I do want to mention that they've done studies where they show that people who do gratitude journaling are happier. Okay, so this isn't just my opinion. This isn't just my experience. There is scientific research that suggests that this is something that you can do to be happier. Happiness is a very funny thing because for most of us, what our ego suggests will make us happy won't. Okay? You take a moment now, think about it. What do you think is going to make you, what are you lacking? What do you need? Maybe it's money. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a bigger house. Maybe it's the remodeling on your kitchen being finished. Whatever it is, that might give you a moment of happiness, right? A few moments. It won't last. It won't last, okay? It doesn't lead to lasting happiness. What leads to lasting happiness are practices like these, getting in the habit of doing these practices, these mental practices, and these transform what I'll call the heart, the mind, and the gut. And this is what can help us with embodiment in a big, big way. All right, everyone. As usual, I'd love to hear from you, your experience with this. If you're already doing it, try it out. If you're not, and come back, let me know what you think. Please reach out if there's any way in which you think that I can be of service to you and I can help you. That's one thing that I do to really keep myself feeling good, is I try and be of service to others. I hope this talk was of service to you. And until next time, namaste and have a great day.